Welcome to Park Talks. This is Daniel.
This is Ronnie. Park it. Let's talk about it.
May 9th. Reach out and touch someone. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. Philippians 2:3-4. Communication is easier now than it has ever been. Whenever we need to get in touch with somebody, we can call, email, or text, regardless of where we are and where they are. Geography isn't an issue. We can instantly send a text message to someone halfway around the world. Some people can even text each other while they are in the same house, just because they don't want to get up and go to other rooms. Without much effort, we are almost always connected if we want to be. But have you thought about what we may be losing when we depend on electronic contact and less face-to-face communication? Our deepest, most meaningful relationships develop in one-on-one time and extended conversation. When we're with others, we understand them much better. We can read facial expressions, pick up on emotional responses, and communicate our own feelings very clearly. The result is more interaction, more depth, and more substance. I believe that if Jesus had all the communication tools of today at his disposal, he would still choose to spend his time face-to-face with his disciples. He would still heal people by touching them physically and be close enough to them that when he spoke to them, they would hear the compassion in his voice. His presence in itself would be meaningful. God designed relationships to be developed and strengthened through personal face-to-face interaction. That's how we really bond with other people. The communication tools available to us today are wonderful. It's great to be able to get in touch with people anywhere, anytime, and I wouldn't want to go back to being unable to contact someone easily when I'm out of town or need a quick response on an urgent matter. I like being able to keep in touch with my kids regardless of where they are. But when we start to depend on technology as a substitute for one-on-one time with each other, we are missing an important key to relationships. And forming virtual bonds, we may be forsaking the benefits of true human interaction. We need to make sure we're not so connected with everything out there that we miss the chance to connect with people directly in front of us. Uncommon key: being connected means thinking of others and reaching out. Make that happen as often as you can.
Ronnie, thank you for that. Today we're going to touch something, and it kind of parallels and wraps right into the same thing. We're going to talk about sacrifice and giving up versus giving up. Let's look at some questions worth exploring. Which one is thought? Which one is active? Sacrifice or giving up? Second question. Which one is better than the other? How are they related? Third question. I find in the Bible teachings on obedience that it's better than sacrifice. When you obey, you don't have to give up anything except your own will and thought to begin with. The Bible says not to be drunk with much wine. Whoever has to go through AA or be an alcoholic. It says don't commit adultery. Who has to deal with sexually transmitted diseases and unwanted pregnancies outside of marriage? So, obedience is better than the sacrifice of trying to remove something painful from your life. Could there be a reason that we're guided not to? What divides the two? What changes the two? In law enforcement, let's go over to like a hostage situation. You have a hostage taker and they decide to give up. Did it cost them anything? Not really. Didn't cost anybody anything. But what if that hostage taker decides to be the sacrifice? Did it cost him anything? What if he decides to sacrifice? Now it's costing something. Okay? Sacrifice is so important, it's mentioned many, 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 many times in the Bible. I don't care what version you're in, it's mentioned in the Bible. Now, sacrifice, let's ask this. This takes me to a story before we look in the scriptures in 1 Chronicles, but it takes me to a story I heard years ago. A Russian general and a Russian commander The general was testing the wear of his commander. So he calls him in, calls him to attention. And in my cheesy Russian accent, here we go. He asks his commander, "What would you give for Mother Russia?" Mother Russia. The commander salutes, and with a bold voice he says, "I would give everything and anything I have for my motherland. I love my motherland." So the commander proceeds. "Sir, if you had 2 automobiles, would you give one for your motherland?" He stands tall with his shoulders back, and he responds, "Absolutely, I give all I have, not just one but both." "Sir, if you had 2 homes, would you give your home for Mother Russia?" "Ah, not just one, but I give 2. How my motherland needs, I give." And this commander went on with a few other lavish things, knowing that this captain didn't have that. Until he came down to something close and personal. The commander asked him, he says, "Captain," the general asked him, he says, "Captain, if you had 2 pair of pants, would you give one for your motherland?" The commander kind of lowered his voice and his head a little bit. And he said, "But I only have but 2 pair to give. All I have is 2 pair of pants. How can I give up anything?" Many people find it easy to give up what they don't own, possess, buy. Sacrifice would cost them nothing. If you have a hamburger and you give that hamburger to a hungry person, the whole entirety of it, you've sacrificed feeding yourself. So if you're equally as hungry as that individual and you sacrifice and you give it to somebody, that is sacrifice. It's painful and it costs you something. If you just rip it in half, you eat half, he eats half, you've given up. You haven't sacrificed, but maybe half, but you still got some for you. Remember what Jesus said in the Gospels when the rich man comes to him and says, "What do I got to do to enter the kingdom of heaven?" He said, "Sell all you have and give it to the poor." Now that would have been a sacrifice if he would have done as he was advised. But this dude didn't even want to give it up. So King David in 1 Chronicles 21:24, and this is just the last half of the scripture, it says, "I will not take for the Lord what is yours and sacrifice a burnt offering that costs me nothing." Wait a minute. Hold on. Time out. Back up. Let's fill this in. Now there's King David, Israel has, or Jerusalem, I think, has just really gone sideways in some of their stuff. Now King David is going to prepare an offering. He needs to, clear things up between him and God. So he's going to go and do this on somebody's threshing floor that they own. He doesn't have the sacrificial animals. He doesn't have the stones he needs. He might have a means of making fire. But David has secured in his thoughts. He has cognitively processed his actions. He's not working off a whim. The wind didn't change directions. And in this cognitive process, he realizes that if you give me the hamburger and I give it to somebody, it's really not even a sacrifice. It's just I didn't stop and take a bite. So even King David says, "I will pay for what I sacrifice. I will suffer the loss, so it's my sacrifice." So this led me to kind of dig a little bit deeper in some other versions of the scripture, like the words "giving up" in the NIV 18 times, in the ESV we see it 16 times, and in KJV it's 10 times. Realizing giving up is a position of thought more than anything else. You have to think it before you can do it. It cannot start anywhere else. Now, you have to position your thought in that area of giving up. Your cognitive process must be, I am going to relinquish. Now, if it's painful or cost you something, guess what? You're giving up. Just move to sacrifice. Jesus says, you don't take my life. I give it up willingly. Right? And then he was sacrificed. Yeah. So if we can adjust the means in which we think and cognitively process how and what we think, the giving up will move to sacrifice. The sacrifice moves through forgiveness, and the forgiveness now moves to healing. It's a stepping stone. Sacrifice has to cause pain or discomfort, and sacrificing something Also, it no longer exists nor controls your life. You can't. Okay, so we're going to look at that a little bit later. Let's look at some direct meaning. Okay, direct meaning is sacrifice, to suffer a loss, give up, renounce, injure, or destroy, especially an ideal, belief, or end. Number 2, the act of offering to a deity something precious. Number 3, the killing of a victim on an altar. Number 4, destruction or surrender of something for the sake of something else. And number 5, something given up or lost. That's only a few. There's quite a few more different meanings. Where else can we see sacrifice? Giving up mentally in a relationship will lead to divorce. When you mentally quit, I'm done. I'm not dealing with it no more. This is just too much. There's no way that I signed on for this. No way. And now I am going to violate all my promises and all my commitments that I've ever made to this person that I say that I love and to God himself if you're in a marriage. And I'm just going to give up. If you're married, you have united. You are now one. Now you have to sacrifice the relationship and be ripped in half and then reestablish yourself as some form of a new life and thought process for you to even move forward. And those who move out of one relationship to another relationship to another relationship to another relationship are seriously just doomed to repeat the last relationship. I've argued with many people. You come off of a divorce. You take the element of time in which you are with that person you divorced. You convert it into months. Round up to the nearest year. Up to, not down to, up to the nearest year. If you don't mentally require yourself to be single, to heal, to be effective, and to learn, then you're doomed to repeat the failures of your former relationship. I don't sit in a lecture, grab out a test, and immediately write it. I would prefer to go study. I have a higher likelihood of getting a higher performance level on that test if I spend time getting to know the material very well. And when the person has been ripped in half due to the sacrifice of a relationship, due to the mindset and the processes of giving up for one reason or the other, and almost every relationship has a different reason of giving up. But once you've achieved that point, for those who have united with that other individual, now you're required almost emotionally to go through the process. I have a lot of people that I've known, and I'm guilty myself, one relationship to the next, with maybe a couple of months or a couple of weeks in between. It's not healthy. It's not smart. At no time would anybody with any good level of understanding encourage you either.
Can I add to that?
Anytime you wish.
Pornography. When you're watching that and you're fantasizing about those women, men.
I haven't often
talked about because then you're taking on that.
Exactly.
And then you're applying that with your relationship to either your spouse or...
If you want to grow a successful corn crop, don't plant corn and beans at the same time. Don't go out in the field beforehand and literally plant some beans and then go out and disc it. A week later, think you're going to plant corn and you're going to get nothing more than successful corn. I have an often used statement that you've heard me say. It's easier to manage what's not in there. Right? Mm-hmm. If I don't put nothing in that coffee cup, it doesn't matter what happens to that coffee cup, I can't spill it. Lid off, toss it back and forth, throw it up in the air, step on it, crush it, tip it over, throw it at you, dump it over your head. If there's nothing in that cup, you will not get wet. I don't have to manage what's in there. People want to run out and their entertainment is watching pornography. Oh, but I watch it with my girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife. Really? Why? Does what you see on TV, is it more or less, better or worse than what you have in real life? What about the individual sitting around just staring at pornography? You got children. Heard a story one time, a young daughter in her early teens, had several young friends who used to come out and hang out all the time. Well, the young daughter, for some reason, needed to use Dad's computer to do a school report, and something flashed up on the computer, and it was pornography related. Now, damaging the thought processes of this young daughter about her father, and the way her father now thinks about all of her young friends. Dads, think about it. Moms, think about it. You will duplicate what you teach your children. You want your children addicted to pornography? You want your daughters to just be laying waste for somebody else? You want your sons to just be out spilling and everything? I
actually just talked about this the other day with a gentleman at church, about my upbringing, and I've shared it, kind of in depth, but just everything that I watched as a kid, growing up in trailer court, everything that I watched from like HBO on up, finding my dad's nudie magazine, going under my watch, looking at that stuff.
Yeah, it's in there.
Drinking a beer at a young age.
Yeah, it's in there.
Smoking cigarettes at a young age.
In there, it becomes a normal response and a normal reaction. This just becomes what we ever. Oh man, I'm lonely. I got nothing to do. I don't want to watch that TV rerun. Where's that magazine? Nowadays, what's that website? You get on your phone. You lock yourself in the bathroom. Yeah,
and that's damaged me even to this day because with past relationships, like you said, going from woman to woman. Not only that, but then I also think about them, and then I pray for them because it's like whatever I had done to them emotionally, it's catching up to me.
Exactly,
and it's torn me apart.
You remember
because I want to make change, and that's being born again and changing.
I get it. You made changes. But the biggest changes that we have to do as human beings is change upstairs. Okay? So, when I was a child, I had a twin-size bed. And it was upstairs. Okay? As I grew up, my body grew bigger. Twin-size bed was cramped. 6'2". Stick that in a 5-foot bed or a 6-foot bed. My head hit the headboard, or my feet hung off the wooden footboard. Or I'd tear the footboard off so I wouldn't hurt my feet. Or I got to sleep in a ball. What'd I do? Got a bigger bed. I grew out of that old life and into the new life. But what did it require? Milk? Meat? Steak? Yeah, all the above. Sometimes that milk is used to wash the meat and the steak down, though, by the way. You don't just stop drinking milk. You don't read the Bible and not read John 3:16, which maybe be the only milk scripture that taught somebody about the Word of God and about His love. You add it in there. You ever eat something that's just so dry you can hardly get it down? Dude, I've read stuff like that in the Bible. If you don't believe me, read the book of Numbers. That one is not easy to get through. That's dry steak. I got to jump in and get some Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts, Romans just seriously to wash it down a little bit. It's thick meat to process. Some of the books I read, it's so thick to process. I don't want to read Mary Had a Little Lamb books after that, but I want to read something that will help me relate that meat and help me get it down into the system so it can process. In a relationship, sacrifice is needed. In every intimate relationship, if it's an intimate with a spouse, with a loved one, or even with God, if you're not willing to sacrifice old thought processes, old ways, levels of guilt even, if God says, I forgive you, how do we dare hold ourselves guilty? It's impossible to do it. But we do. But I did this and I did that, and God goes, I know, I made you that way. You screwed up, and guess what else I made? Forgiveness. You'll never be healed until you forgive yourself.
I've always gone back to that because then when you're alone, like everything from my past, like just talking about it, got brought back in to the light, and here I am trying to.
And there's a probability that what I'm about to read, the next 2 pages, I wrote.
I talked about with my friends yesterday who are not married, and just my age, my generation in general, which I'm really, I've been worried about, We're all trying to grow, and it's like, oh, well, I don't care. I got a job. I got this. I got that. Seeing this girl, she's got her stuff together. And I'm trying to relate, trying to talk to them, and I'm sure I should be happy for them, but at the same time, I'm worried because bringing in my spiritual walk, my journey, and what led me here, and I'm wounded.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to tell them, and especially with family or my brother, whatever, and I'm like, I haven't really even had that talk with him yet, but just
So do you believe
marriage.
Do you believe that in your future, not today, not tomorrow, maybe not next month, and maybe not for a year or two, but there's a beautiful woman out there that God's got and planned for your life?
I do,
So do I.
but it takes a lot of work on myself.
I know. That's why I spent years getting work done before I went in. And I went to...
And I was ready to just jump and go and run. And
aren't we all?
Let's go do it
They
now.
look yummy, dude. Especially when it's been a while.
no, I'm just meaning like changing myself. Like, I want to do it right now, go.
Yeah.
It's like, well, where do I go?
I know.
I don't hear
Wouldn't it
anything.
be great if we could just plant the garden and grab a tomato tomorrow?
Yeah.
I always say in Park Tucks that I'm not a gardener and not a farmer, right? Well, I may have to stop this saying that now. I'm not a farmer, I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
But you were there and helped me rototill the soil last Sunday. You know what I did Monday?
Planting.
5 flats of seeds are already started. First time in my life. Normally gave me the guidance on how to do it. I went out and I sat there for several hours and actually screwed stuff up the first time around. She came out, she goes, "You don't do starters on beans. Use those." Honey, do I need to take the seeds out of the dirt and start over? Yeah. Yeah, you do. You really do. Reclaim all the raw materials, and I wanted tomatoes in those, not beans. So she sat there, and she was, fortunately she kept good conversation going. I was so frustrated at myself. So frustrated. So I'm sitting there with a knife, going through this, pulling the beans out. And I'm like, okay, I'll get this right. But I learned. I can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. See, when you truly love a person, and this is something that's very important to me, Ronnie, you will encounter a woman in your life, in your future, that you love so much, it'll shake you to the core. Okay? On the account she's not in your life now, what are you willing to sacrifice now for her then? You see, because Jesus didn't know us when he sacrificed for us. I mean, he did know us, but we weren't formed yet.
Right.
I mean, he was calling us by name before knitting us together. So if you don't have her now, prayer and fasting, as somebody told me about that, a pastor told me about that in a sermon one time, and I'm like, yeah, prayer and fasting for somebody I'm not married to, that she's having a great day, she's healthy, she's doing good, that helps a lot. That did work. Realizing I needed to sacrifice some stuff of my life, that worked too. It's still working. The reality is you and your partner can become much happier if both of you will choose to make a sacrifice or several sacrifices in order for the relationship to work. And it's not a sacrifice of one and done. Sometimes it's many, daily, both of you. And it doesn't mean I can't figure out where we want to eat, you can't figure out what we want to eat, we're just going home. No. It's not a negative. Somebody make a decision, somebody accept the decision. It's called a compromise. Most often the sacrifice that you will make will entirely affect your life. Not just one spot. Because as we start changing little things about the world around us, many areas of the world around us change so far outside of our control, there's nothing we can do. Many musicians have compiled songs about sacrifice. Now, I'm not even talking about Christian recording artists. How about Elton John? What's his last Hallelujah album he did? We're still waiting on it. He ain't done one yet. Okay? He does a song called Sacrifice. If you look up the lyrics of it, in this song, they're sacrificing their relationship because of lack of communication, desires outside the relationship. The interesting thing...
And communication, again, it's not just through text. It's not through
That's not communication.
Through the device.
No.
Going
It's
back
face
to
to
the
face.
book.
It's exactly what you said there. If you're not face to face, we're communicating face to face. If I'm texting you, hey, how you doing? That's a message. It's a form of communication. But like a fax machine and an email, It's the worst form of communication. If you do not have any other means, use it. Remember when Paul was shipwrecked, right? Remember the ships being smashed against the rocks and everything, and threw everything off, and they said, get to the boats, or not the boats, but get to the planks and the wood and float yourself to shore, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many of them were waiting for yachts to show up? How many of them were waiting for the Coast Guard to arrive? How many of them were waiting on Jesus? None of them. Giving up. Let's look at giving up. A verbal act of admitting defeat, yielding, surrendering, relinquishing. A verbal act of renouncing a claim or right or position. That's giving up. We're identified that a person gives up in their mind.
Yeah.
More than anything and anywhere else, you will have to give up the way you think about the past and process the past to move forward.
I just had a conversation with friends last night about it. He's like, well, you'll never change. You're always going to be thinking about that. It's like, well, I'm ready to move
Baloney.
forward.
Here we go. Judges 2:19. But when the judge died, the people returned to the ways even more corrupt than those of their ancestors, following the other gods and serving and worshiping them. They refused to give up their evil practices and their stubborn ways. What is better? If I'm giving up something that's deeply rooted inside, or if I'm sacrificing something that's deeply rooted inside. When the ground has to give up the tree that is rooted there, it is not an easy task if the or a tree has been there for a few years. As a sapling, this simple task might only take a couple of fingers or a hand or two, possibly a little back break, owie, as we yank it up by the roots. Although let that sapling sit in the dirt 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, or even longer. We will need a shovel, a saw, an axe, maybe even a large vehicle, heavy equipment. And what if there are other trees? They've been planted over the years there. Things like this require help and or assistance to remove. When I was in my early teens, our neighbor man, I guess, had a massive issue with pornography. He liked to buy it and then just kind of toss it out in the trash can randomly. And this time of year in northern Indiana, winds like to pick up and take the lids off trash cans, and animals knock them over, and things get blown down the alley. And in my young ways, I picked one up. And next week, found another one. And the next week, guess what? More and more and more. So there was a time in my life when that was extremely difficult. Not just for me to stay away from it, but then to relinquish what I was thinking of. That root spent many years, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, growing deep.
In the military, it's really bad, isn't it?
I was just getting ready to say that, dude.
Yeah,
I was right there, drawing an air to say the military led me even
friend
deeper.
send me one on like a thumb drive.
Thumb drives? Oh, yeah.
Day off. And it would just be like, okay.
Yep, flashing through it. Yep, the only thing that really changes is the background and the outfits and the face.
Yeah.
Everything else is just about identical. Maybe skin tones here and there. If you're wasting your time in pornography out there, you're wasting your time in that junk, think of this. Every single, we'll say from a male's aspect, every single female you're looking at is somebody's mother, daughter, and or sister.
I'd say the same thing applies with like your Snapchat, your TikTok, and all that other
YouTube.
stuff. YouTube, yeah. Well,
Your search engine.
Twitch, the gaming thing, because that's another big one.
Okay.
Another big one that you watch other people play games. Well, now it's become more like, watch me dance, watch me.
I see that on all these crazy little things. And it's like we're getting addicted to our phones, and like you even read there, not human interaction. We've lost so much face-to-face. If you're not FaceTiming somebody, people would rather text than talk.
I'm guilty of pushing away from people too.
Yeah.
Of just
Aren't
because
we
it's
all?
like I don't feel like I don't know, you know.
It's pretty easy to conquer.
Because I feel like I was also part of the problem. Maybe just my age.
Do you think isolating is part of the problem? They're part of the solution?
No.
Okay.
But that's where I find myself back to, because it's like, well, I've given up the things that were addiction. Or, you know, God has helped me get rid of those things. Well, now it's, okay, what am I gonna replace those with?
Not just replace those with, how are you going to get that out of your thought when you're alone?
Yeah.
We have accountability partners so that we can manage this stuff in our thoughts when we're alone.
Yeah.
Not when we're with them. You and me are hanging out. I'm not thinking about pornography.
No.
I'm thinking about disc golf. I'm thinking about my wife's cooking. Because
Yeah.
you've been there too. Come on.
Yeah.
Tell me you ain't thinking about that now. Okay? I mean, disc golf.
Yeah.
There's so much more to think about then. But when we're alone, this is when the enemy likes to divide and conquer.
And this is where I've been.
Who can see between your ears? One additional thing I would like to point out or to mention comes from shooting sports. Shooting sports, archery, firearms, wrist rockets, addle, throwing knife, hatchet. I'm just labeling it all shooting sports. Something where a projectile is designated to hit a predetermined target. Okay? When you focus on something, there is a much higher likelihood of you hitting your target. And you will get better hitting that target over time. You are focusing on and responding with negative or positive thought, word, and action. The response is up to you. The triggers, or what triggers the response, is not up to you. When you are focused on and responding with either negative or positive thought, word, and action, the response is up to you. But what triggered the response is not up to you. We also cannot focus on how, who, what, or if somebody hurt us or has done something wrong to us in the past. All we can do is cognitively process what happened or was said, then choose what we focus on afterwards. Forgiveness brings healing. You can't have healing without forgiveness first. It won't happen. Forgiveness also means not repeating the events in word or deed. What's that mean? If I repeat it in word, that means it's in thought first. If we are going to stop thinking about it, we can't talk about it. If I feel that punching somebody in the nose is wrong in my life, and all I do is walk around thinking about how many people I want to punch in the nose, and tell everybody that I'm going to punch them in the nose, and talk about how much people I punched in the nose, then I'm not getting it out of my life. I'm focusing on it.
Yeah.
Now, if I seek forgiveness for punching everybody in the nose, those relationships can be healed. Somebody punches me in the nose, we're not going to have a great relationship. They seek forgiveness because we'll say it was accidental, then a relationship can be formed and healed. How can a wound heal if I leave a knife in it? Forgiveness is the removal of the knife. On the account forgiveness costs something and or might have some level of discomfort or pain in it, I would say that we are leaning towards sacrifice and not just giving up. The giving up part is where we stop harboring it in our thoughts. The sacrifice is we emotionally process and go through, getting it out of our head and out of our life, and then forgiving somebody. We own nothing more. We own nothing more than our thoughts. We leave behind nothing more than our legacy. Our thoughts drive our words and deeds and actions. These are either going to become negative or positive. The outcome of our thoughts become either life and death, Bible tells us that, peace or violence, love or hate, growth or destruction, blessings or curses, facts or opinions, past or present/future, assumptions or assistance. If we have a pattern of thinking for life and it lands in false meaning or negative meaning, there cannot be questions as to why this life we have exhibited little growth or not much peace when storms land. In Proverbs 6:12-16, a worthless person, a wicked man, goes about with crooked speech. You could also put negative in place of the word crooked. Winks with his eye, signals with his feet, points with his finger. With perverse heart, desires evil, continually sowing discord. Therefore, calamity will come upon them suddenly. In a moment, he will be broken beyond healing. A worthless person, a wicked man, goes about with crooked speech. That's verse 12. Quite interesting. Proverbs 6:12. Most times when we find there is a painful or difficult past, it comes through words. This proves that the past, is still stuck in our thoughts. When it is still showing up in our conversations and we speak about our past, braggingly, looking for a victim's label. I beat that guy up so many times, a victor's label. When it keeps showing up, we bring that past back to life. The person's been abused. They tell everybody about it. Bad has happened. They can't stop talking about it. If what you're talking about is not moving you or somebody else closer to God or moving you or somebody else forward, change your thoughts. You can figure out a way. If you can, you don't need God, right? But when God shows you a way to reknit your past into a communicative level that as you express it to somebody in a peaceful, delicate, gentle manner that does not show you as a victim, but shows God's love and grace for healing, repairing, forgiving, blessing, then use the story. Use that testimony that you received of the past. How this bothered you and this took control over you and this drew you away. But make sure when you're done that we fulfill Matthew 5:16. Let your light so shine before men that they see your works, yet give glory to our Father which is in heaven. Now, when these past issues and a negative connotation or a victimization mentality are showing up in our conversations, here's the problem. We bring that past back to life. It takes breath to give life. Say a word without breathing. Say a word without thinking about it first. Say a word without breath and thought. Anything that lives has breath in it. Bring words to life. All you have to do is speak them. I have seen how allowing the past, being as painful as it is, will control one's life. It controlled mine for years. It will have to be uprooted. If the seed literally recently landed in the dirt of that big, huge redwood tree or oak tree, I don't care what species it is, and I can uproot that, it will literally take fingers. The longer it sits, the deeper the roots. The earth or the dirt will not want to give it up. And by the way, the earth doesn't tell the tree to move. Matter of fact, it holds the root very close, holds the tree very tight. It withstands storms, weather. The longer it sits, the more it'll take. When it does come up, you ever seen a great big tree that got blown over by a tornado or a massive windstorm? Mm-hmm. That absolute crater, it removes the earth with it even. But when somebody goes in there with the proper tools like we mentioned before, a hoe, a shovel, an axe, excavating equipment, you take buckets of water in there, you could literally remove the biggest tree and wash every speck of dirt off the roots. And you'll never see the dirt where it was at. You can always fill it back in, plant grass, reseed it, let growth happen right there, and that piece of land that used to bear that tree will look like it's never been there. The dirt, humus. We are called humans. We are dirt. We have allowed things to grow in our life, or they have been introduced into our life via our eye gates and our ear gates that need removed. Does that mean we need a psychiatrist? I don't know. For everybody's need is a little different. Do I need a pastor? I don't know. Do I need a priest to do an exorcism? I wouldn't go to a priest, but it's up to you. Okay? Might be there. There might be spirits of the past. Pornography, my understanding, is a spirit. Hate is a spirit. How hard is it going to be for your dirt to give up the roots that have been there for so long? Jesus even said that some spirits can't just be called out. They require prayer and fasting. This will be a cognitive thought process, also called conscious effort, to move the giving up, which is thought, into sacrifice, which is physical. This means when these thoughts come to the forefront of your mind, or when there is some past you would consider communicating about, this is in talking about, sharing with the negative past experiences with others, basically waking up the sleeping giant, we literally focus on something different. We have no choice. How do you do that? My technique, and I'm going to use Scripture. The Scripture says, "Thy word, O Lord, have I hidden in my heart that I might not sin against you." If sin begins in our thought, then what would I put in my thought to cover the gap or the hole remained where the tree was uprooted? The Word of God. Not more music, not somebody's advice, the Bible. So whatever's reinforcing the negative thought, which is basically, if you're, let's just harp and stay over on the pornography. It's all about sex. It's all about lust. It's all about literally greed. And a man's aspect, who can get more? Who can get the next one? All right. So if that be in there, we need to grow the spirit more. Well, how do you grow the body more? Feed it. Work it out. How do you grow the spirit more? Feed it. Feed it and work it out. Best way to do it. Prayer, fasting, worship, life of worship. Get yourself away from that area. For me, what would happen is when I would get to that point where these thoughts were starting to contaminate me, and I knew they were starting to take over, I would go for a long run. And I wouldn't just go for a long run with nothing but music streaming in my head, because a lot of the music these days, just like we talked about with Elton John's song called Sacrifice, it's about sacrificing the relationship. It's about more adultery. It's about more lust. So just like pornography, just turn the page. It's just a different girl, different background, different whatever. Everything anatomically is about identical. No difference. Somebody's mom, daughter, sister. If this does not influence, if our thoughts do not influence or guide our present or our future to a positive outcome or closer to God or letting God's light shine, what are you thinking about? How focused can I be on the forward journey in my car if I'm staring in the rearview mirror? Will I have a successful trip forward by looking in the rear view? The rear view mirror is about 100 plus times smaller than a windshield for a reason. Okay. Interesting parallel here as we close. If I walk up to the edge of a mountain's cliff and I choose to turn and walk away, we'll say I turn to the left. I have sacrificed nothing. I've only given up walking forward. I didn't give up walking. I would think the sacrifice would have happened if I would have kept walking forward, knowing that I needed to stop what I was doing or give up, and that something needed to change in my life. What is it? Is there something that we need to change in our life? Is there something we need to eliminate from our life? It all starts in thought. It all starts. Even the relationship that we have or do not have with Jesus Christ. Our faith, our hope. Tell me which ones of those are not thought. I want to thank you guys for joining us this week. This is Daniel.
Ronnie.
We look forward to talking to you next week. Be blessed, everybody.